In this episode of The Trend Talk, he's worked behind the scenes in Hollywood as a writer for Jane the Virgin, but he also has star power. We talked to Rafael Agustin, who received the Emerging Leader Award by the LA Times. Documentarian Ernie Quintero sits with us to talk about his new film, which chronicles his brother's battle with ALS. Finally, emerging female director Jazmin Aguiar talks to us about her award-winning short film. All that and more on The Trend Talk.
Welcome to the Trend Talk. We're so excited that you can join us. Recently, Naibe and I were MCs at the Farm Worker Justice Awards reception. It was a wonderful experience, don't you think?
Oh, it was so amazing to have so many powerful Latinos that have actually changed our community in one room, like Dolores Huerta, who's a legend, Paul Schrade, Edward James Olmos, and it was all for the sake of the farm workers.
Also, the artist, Carmen Carrasco, who has been documenting the work that the farm workers and the United Farm Workers Organization has done, and Sophie, the little girl that wrote that letter to the Pope, who actually had a meeting with her, and she went to Congress. Amazing people there.
That's right. And I really like what the Farm Worker Justice does, because they really are the voice of the voiceless, in a sense. I mean, they really advocate for farm workers, for, improving their wages, for, looking at their immigration status, and for so many different issues, because farm workers really feed the country, and in some cases the world. So they should get their, their fair shake of rights.
And I never thought about it, but with this whole Me Too movement, of course, it would also affect the women in the fields. The celebrities, the journalists, the executives, they have a platform to come out and they have a voice, and people will listen to them. But who listens to the people in the fields when this happens to them?
That's right. And sometimes they themselves are scared to talk because for whatever reason, maybe their immigration status, maybe they just don't want to cause any problems.
Yes.
So it's
that they'll lose their job.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's so nice to have an organization that is looking at that and saying, let's give you a platform to kind of call out sexual harassment if it's happening.
And for all the farm workers to get informed about this, the Farm Worker Justice is doing an industrial showing how sexual harassment affects them and what they can do about it.
That's awesome.
The industrial is like a film that is they showed within their companies or within
to educate them, right?
Exactly, within groups. So they did that, and I think that that's amazing. They're empowering them with information.
And I understand that the actual actors for that informational video were the farm workers.
Yes.
So that was empowering for them too, right?
It was wonderful. They maybe some of them have even gone through it, but it was amazing to see how empowered they were, and they took it seriously, and they did a really good job. Let's look at this.
¡Muévanse! ¡Échenle ganas, échenle ganas!
Mayor, ya llegó el agua.
No, pero ven acá, aquí tengo agua.
¿Dónde?
Ven.
No, pues hacerte.
Ven.
¿Dónde?
El mayordomo se la lleva medio abrazada,
No, déjame
mientras
sola.
María muestra resistencia.
Pero aquí hay agua.
No, no me toque.
Ella se resiste, pero el mayordomo la toma por la fuerza y la
Déjame
asalta
abajo.
sexualmente.
Déjame en paz, déjame en paz.
It is an epidemic there as well, and The Atlantic had a headline, Sexual Harassment Epidemic in America's Farms.
That's such a shame, but I'm so glad that they're doing something about it. And by the way, congratulations. This was your directorial debut, right?
Yes. My good friend David Damon Figueroa, who works for the Farm Worker Justice, he asked me if I would want to direct, and because he felt that a woman should be directing them, and the women would feel more comfortable to also be part of the industrial. So it was great to have that opportunity.
Latina empowerment on the fields and behind the camera.
Everywhere. And speaking of empowerment, our next guest is someone who started out as an undocumented immigrant, and he is now a writer on the hit show Jane the Virgin that you can see on ABC. That's empowerment, and we're going to find out all about that when we come back. So don't go away.
Why were you never told, or that you were illegal?
My dad and her didn't want me to feel any different because they felt that dreams shouldn't have any borders.
Ya llegó el carnaval, mucha gente nos visita desde lejos y
Welcome back. Today we have a gentleman who beat all odds in Hollywood. He was an undocumented immigrant. He wrote this hit show while he was at UCLA, and now he is a writer for the hit show Jane the Virgin on the CW. We want to welcome Rafael Agustin. We're so honored to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. And you've always had success early on. You graduated from UCLA with an MA in film and TV, and you were selected as a fellow of the Sundance Episodic Story Lab, which is no easy feat,
right,
with your original TV family sitcom, Illegal. So speaking of Illegal, talk to us about when you found out you were illegal and how that's impacted you as a storyteller.
I actually found out I was undocumented when I was in high school. And the way I found out was I actually applied to go to a university of my dreams, and they sent a letter back saying, "You are a perfect candidate. Can you please send us your real social security number?"
Wow.
And my all-American life just came crumbling down on me.
Wow.
Because you were the president, you were the prom king,
I
you
was
were
the
everything.
prom king, the class president. I mean, I basically modeled my life after Zach Morris. And I didn't know how to deal with this idea that I was undocumented because there was no episode of Saved by the Bell where Zach gets deported. So I was like, I don't know what to do right
Wow.
now.
And how, why were you never told, or, that you were illegal?
Okay, so that's a great question. I asked my parents that, and I asked them recently. And my mom told me, and I totally stole this from her and put it in one of my scripts. She said that my dad and her didn't want me to feel any different because they felt that dreams shouldn't have any borders.
That's
Dreams
beautiful.
shouldn't have any borders.
You
That
can't
is-
even write that.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
While you were at UCLA, you and a couple of friends wrote this hit show at UCLA. And
Which you can't say the title of.
I can't say the title because it was very controversial.
It was.
Even though you traveled it around, you went to different colleges, universities, they finally even made the New York Times when they reported that Long Beach did not let you
Yeah.
perform because of the name.
Yeah.
And let me just give the audience a hint. The three guys were Latino, an African American, and an Asian. So it's NWC.
And you
So-
can guess who I played.
Yeah, you can guess what those letters stand for. But what happened after that, and did the show die because of that?
No, not at all. In fact, we toured the nation for like 7 years. 10 months out of the year. It was unheard of. Our first year and a half of touring, we grossed $1.5 million.
What?
Which is crazy for a theater show.
You mean I've known a millionaire all this time?
I was broke, but there was a bunch of us. But again, gross, not netted. And then the show was a huge hit because in LA it plays as a comedy, but when you're in Kentucky and Pennsylvania,
Oh, yeah.
it was like a social justice piece. It was like a minority outreach type of piece. And what ultimately ended up happening is that Hollywood came a calling, and a big studio contacted us. We developed a TV comedy based on NWC. And that was my first foray into TV development, and
Yes.
I hated it because there was what we wanted as the writers, what the
Right.
producers wanted, what the showrunners wanted, what the network and studio wanted, and what came out on that other side of that sausage making machine was a show that I created with my name on it that I didn't like. And that's what happened to NWC.
And so
Hollywood
you guys
came
didn't go
a-calling.
forward because of that?
We didn't move forward because of that, because after 7 years, we felt that the dialogue in the nation had changed a little bit, and maybe I felt NWC had its time, and now it's, time to write something else. And that something else was my TV pilot that I took to Sundance, which
Right.
is Illegal.
So talk to us about what you're working on next.
Well, we just wrapped Jane the Virgin. It's the final season, season 5. I just aired my first episode of Jane the Virgin.
That's your solo
My
episode.
first, I've been a staff writer for 2 years, and then I was assigned an episode this past season. And now I'm working on Illegal, which is now being called Rafa the Great.
Really?
Yeah.
So
I don't want that title. I want to call it Illegal because I'm very in your face, but everyone convinced me to change it to Rafa the Great, so we don't lead with the politics and we lead with the heart of it. and we're currently shopping that, and I'm hoping
amazing.
to get that.
So we can possibly see the show Illegal or Rafa the Great or whatever iteration it becomes on a network or on a streaming service.
My goal,
possibly.
because my executive producer is Gina Rodriguez, our goal is to have the first undocumented family comedy on television.
Wow.
So talk to us really quick about the International Latino Film Festival and the Youth Project.
Yeah, so LALIF, the Los Angeles Latino International Film Festival, will happen in 2019 from July 31st through August 4th. And this year we have a mandate to find U.S. Latinx filmmakers, because I feel like especially Latino International Film Festivals focuses a lot on international filmmakers, but no one is focusing on our U.S. Latino and Latina filmmakers, and that's what we hope to do this year. And out of all this work, we grew out the Youth Cinema Project, which essentially took film graduate school and put it in 4th grade. The idea is to prevent dropout rates for Black and brown kids, but we've had this positive impact of changing reading and writing proficiency, school engagement, social emotional empowerment. So now we've taken filmmaking and turned it into project-based learning and put it in public schools around the state.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us on the Trend Talk. And coming up, you're going to hear another amazing story of a documentarian who filmed his own family life. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
But it's basically the story of my brother going through ALS, and you see his trajectory of the illness take its course. But it's also all the blessings that have happened around his life.
Ya llegó el carnaval, mucha gente nos visita. Desde lejos y...
Our next guest brings a story of hope, resilience, and love. After his brother was diagnosed with ALS, he picked up his camera and decided to document the entire journey. And what resulted was a powerful documentary called A Sacred Journey. Take a look.
My brother Juan, at the age of 35, was given 3 years to live. I had an appointment. I went to go see the neurologist. He did a couple of tests. I went back in on the end of October, and he diagnosed me with ALS, Lou Gehrig's. You know, when they gave me the news, just the first thing that came to my mind was my family.
Does he have to get on drugs? Is he going to be in a wheelchair?
There's no other option unless Juan decides to extend his life with a ventilator.
Tenemos que respetar su decisión.
Entonces, ¿ya estuvo? ¿Ustedes estarían bien con eso?
Si eso quieren.
Claro, y que sea la voluntad de Dios.
Pero tú qué quieres para él, ¿va?
And we want to welcome Ernesto Quintero, director of this documentary, producer, and obviously that's your life, of A Sacred Journey. Talk to us about what does this documentary tell?
Well, it's basically, every time I see that trailer, it chokes me up. And I've been working on this film for 10 years now, and it never fails to move me to see my brother in that condition. But it's basically the story of my brother going through ALS, and you see his trajectory of the illness take its course. But it's also all the blessings that have happened around his life with ALS.
You, like you say, you've been working on it for 10 years. At what point, because you got the diagnosis, and then at what point did you decide, I am going to do a documentary about this? And that was a hard decision because it involved bringing in all the family.
Yeah, I never thought it was going to be a full-length documentary. I just wanted to, as I was watching my brother lose his life, because ALS robs you of your life completely. And it starts off with, in his case, it started off with one arm. So he lost mobility in one arm. And then it moved on to the other arm, and then it moved on to his legs, and slowly it just paralyzed his body. So as he was going through this, I started thinking, I'm gonna lose my brother in a few years, so I wanna celebrate him. I'm gonna do a short video of his life, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and just have a barbecue and screen in the backyard and just do that. But a good friend of mine, Yvonne Jimenez, who's a producer on this now, she saw that, and she says, she was working at Sundance at the time, and she said, you have a story here. She said, let's develop it, I'll help you. So that's kind of how it came about.
And what I love about this documentary, it's not just the story of your brother. It's a story about a Latino family. You know, all of our picnics and our barbecues and the camaraderie and the culture. And your mom is also a very strong figure in the documentary, and I admire her so much for changing careers at, over 60. She had a flower shop, and then she kind of decided to become a nurse, right? To take care of your brother. So can you talk to us about her story?
Sure. Yeah, my mom mom's an amazing person. She's one of my role models, and we had a 30-year flower business that the whole family just kind of, worked, and that got us through school and all that good stuff. And at some point, she had to sell it because, you know how we are as Latinos, we take care of each other. So she decided to go to nursing school and graduate. But it's just, so now she runs the operation. And if you think about ALS patients, there's only 5% of ALS patients that get on a ventilator. So there's not much training around that.
Right.
So my mom trains every nurse that comes through there, so she's carrying that role. She oversees all the nurses, and we all help out as much as we can. But if you ask her, she wants to be a realtor. She wants to be a talk show host. She's not done yet.
She'll have to be our next guest.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. She'll love that.
So this is a story that, like we've already said, it started out with a family and it grew to be a documentary, but now you want to expand this voice and you're lobbying, or you're trying to get to the Congress in DC to actually pay attention to this and the caregiving end of the situation. So tell us about that.
There's 66 million caregivers in this country, and the story talks about that. You're either a caregiver or you will be receiving care at some point or another. Yeah. We all qualify for that. So the idea is to celebrate, like people like my mom, to say to her, share with her and show her that she needs to take care of herself, because 40% of all caregivers die before the person they're taking care of.
Wow.
So we don't understand what it means to caregive, then we're in danger. So that's one of the purposes of our tour.
Right.
Another one is to try to somehow reach the government and say there's something happening here. As a family, we're receiving all the funds that we need to take care of our brother, but there's no qualified nurses. So my mom trains these nurses, and they come in and she spends a half a day, sometimes a full day, training these nurses, and the next day
they're not there.
They're gone. And this happens every week. But back to back for 5 years. It's that.
Wow.
That's the hardship we're dealing with in terms of nursing and care.
So obviously you're changing the narrative, because that's why these stories are so important, so we can get educated and informed. And I really congratulate you, and quickly, because time is running out. But I wanted to ask you, this changed your life as well. I understand you were kind of going down a wrong path, and then after this happened, now you're a successful producer, director. You've worked with J-Lo. You've worked with a lot of amazing people, right?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I was struggling with drug addiction for a long time, maybe close to 12 to 15 years. Wow. And when my brother was diagnosed, I was already 6 years of trying to, in and out of rehabs, trying to figure out how I was going to change my life. And it wasn't until I saw him not being able to move his arms that I realized, it was 5 months after his prognosis, that I realized, wow, this guy's doing everything to try to live, and here I am taking my life by using drugs. So I went home and I dropped to my knees and I asked God to help me. And somehow he did, and my brother is 14 years living with ALS, and I'm 14 years sober.
Wow.
So.
And that's a powerful scene in the documentary.
Oh, thank you. And that's our sacred journey.
That's right.
Together.
All right. Well, Ernesto, thank you so much. This is truly a powerful, powerful, amazing film. And you're educating so many of us about this disease and possibly help find a cure. So thank you. And where can people find the film?
People can go to our website, sacredjourneyfilm.com. They can see the trailer there. They can see the upcoming screenings, our plan, our mission statements, all the miracles that have happened.
Okay.
So, sacredjourneyfilm.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ernesto.
Thank you. Thank you.
And coming up, we have a budding film director. Jazmin Aguiar is the female director of the future. We'll tell you why after this break.
Like just making someone care about the character. Like it could be a crazy cool plot, but like if you don't care about them, what's the point? And it's kind of hard to build that up.
Ya llegó el carnaval, mucha gente nos visita. Desde lejos y
Our next guest is a rising star behind the camera. Jazmin Aguiar is a budding film director whose short film The Letter has already won several prizes, including the Jury Award at the San Antonio Film Festival in the Short College category. She's also won a Young Entertainer Award. And there's a bright future ahead of her. So I want to welcome Jazmin Aguiar to the Trend Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
So talk to us. The letter obviously got a lot of buzz, a lot of prizes. What is the short film about?
It's about two children in Mexico who receive a letter from their father who left to the U.S. to provide a better life for them. So they try and open the letter to discover what happened to him. So it's kind of like the mystery and them kind of debating whether they should read it or shouldn't read it. And that's the letter.
So what in your background inspired you, or who inspired you to take the route of directing?
For directing, I originally started in animation. So that was something that I always thought I was going to do, always the arts. And I kind of was more traditional animation than the computer animation, and I didn't really like the computer animation. But storytelling is a big part of that, and film is something that's always been a part of my life. So I naturally moved on to that, and I was like, I'm going to switch majors to film.
Awesome. And I'm glad that you're going for it. Directing, I mean, that's a big job in any production, whether it's a short film or a big film. Talk to us about the different directors that you've maybe, admired their career and their style. What are some of the ones that you like?
I think the biggest one would probably be Edgar Wright. He's just so fun and different. It's so distinguishable when you see his movies versus another one.
Can you name some of his movies?
Yeah, so he did Baby Driver, Shaun of the Dead.
Yes.
Very edgy, right?
Yeah, and it just kind of a new twist on certain movies he does. And of course Guillermo del Toro, I don't know, that's just one for sure, being into fantasy, and of course going through a phase growing up, kind of dark gothic, of course I loved Guillermo del Toro. That and Tim Burton growing up. So those are big influences.
So you just mentioned film directors.
Yeah.
So what kind of directing, is that where you want to go rather than TV, you want to do film directing?
Yeah, definitely film. I just prefer narrative the most.
Yeah. So obviously The Letter, which was your first short film that got a lot of buzz, was about immigration in a way, or what kids have to go through when their parents are in another country. What kinds of stories do you want to tell? Do you want to keep telling Latino stories, or not necessarily? What kinds of stories are you aiming to direct?
This one in particular was more based around my family, so it was a very personal thing for me. I am looking to direct, right now I'm writing for a feature, but I really want to tell more of the kind of Chicano story, because there's not really a lot of stuff that talks about that. So if they do, it's always about gangs or something, but it's kind of funny being a Chicano, isn't it?
Do you identify as a Chicano?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you identify Chicano? Because a lot of different people have different interpretations of what a Chicano is.
I mean, I'm Mexican-American, living in LA, my parents, I'm first generation American, and it's just interesting, you're used to the customs of Mexican culture, but you're not Mexican. When you tell someone, oh, I'm Mexican, they're like, oh, from Mexico, where? No, I'm from here. So it's kind of weird, and growing up, Spanish was my first language, but growing up learning from my grandma, sometimes she'd say I'd mess up on words, but they would never correct me, they just laugh at me. So it's kind of you're disconnected because you're not necessarily Mexican, but you're not American. It's its own little thing.
Kind of like what I believe La India Maria said, ni de aquí, ni de allá, right? But it's beautiful to also belong to two different cultures.
Yeah, definitely.
So what is proven to be the most challenging as a director for you?
Just finding a story, just making people care about it. Just making someone care about the character. It could be a crazy cool plot, but if you don't care about them, what's the point? And it's kind of hard to build that up, especially in a short when you don't have much time.
So when you were growing up, was there a film that you saw that kind of inspired you to take on this creative path of filmmaking? And if so, which one?
I really liked Beetlejuice growing up because it had a mixture of things, the animation, the stop motion. It was just so creative that I thought that's really fun. Getting to do that would be awesome.
So you talked about that project, that you're currently writing a project. So you have that you're working on. What other? Tell us about that one. But if you have any other projects, we would love to know what you're doing that.
Okay. So for that one, it's about a girl. 'Cause I'm from the South LA area, who is going to have a quinceañera but doesn't want one. So it's kind of you know, the two cultures, it's a little bit different generation, kind of going through that process. And of course, just being in that area and just relating to a bunch of people I know who had quinceañeras but didn't want them. It's kind of weird, you know, it's a nice gesture, but it's about that. And then another one I was working on, I'm writing for, is for someone else, which is about two brothers who are gonna go on kind of ready to go be killed.
Oh no, a little darker. That's a topic. So quick question before we wrap it up, did you have a quinceañera?
I didn't, but my mom really wanted to give me one, and I understand, but they still want to, even though they can't afford it. I just,
sometimes those dresses are a little too out of control.
Huge. Yeah,
Anyway, Jazmin, thank you so much for being here as a guest on the Trend Talk. Where can people find you if they want to follow your career and everything else that you're doing?
You could follow me on Instagram at thisjazzcat, and mostly Instagram. That's where I'm mostly at.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Can't wait to see the different productions that are going to come out of your creative mind coming up in the future. Thank you, Jazmin.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with a lot more on the Trend Talk.
Well, that's it for today. We want to thank all our guests for coming out and joining us on the Trend Talk.
And remember to follow us on social media and tune in next time, because if it's trending, we're talking.
Ya llegó el carnaval, todo es fiesta y alegría.
Con cultura, estos días llenos de algarabía.
Ya llegó